Hello, and welcome to the webinar on how to empower your remote testing team to deliver perfect mobile apps. I'm Christina Cardoza, news editor of SC Times. Before we get started, I have just a couple of quick housekeeping announcements. First, this webinar will be recorded and available on demand in about 24 hours after the event. Secondly, we will be doing a live Q&A after the presentation, so you can submit your questions through the Control Panel's Questions tab at any time during the event, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Everyone here, I'm sure, has felt the impact of the pandemic. It forced many of us to work in new work environments. And now that remote and distributed workforces are becoming the new normal, your testing teams more than ever need proper tools to ensure high coverage and high quality mobile apps. This webinar will help you empower your remote mobile testing teams, go over the benefits of cloud-based real device platforms and the different offerings out there. Here to talk about this more, we have Alex Dragg, the product marketing manager for Coviton, and Tyler Mullen, a solutions engineer at Coviton. So Alex, I'll let you take it away.
Awesome, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us today for this webinar. We're super pumped to share the story around how to really empower your remote testing teams to deliver perfect mobile applications, especially given the context right now of such a distributed workforce. So a whole lot of stuff planned for today, and we're really excited to dive into it. As Christina mentioned, my name is Alex Dragg, so I'm head of product marketing here at Coviton. So I sort of live and breathe product direction, product strategy, and of course the messaging, positioning, making sure that what we're building is what you all want. Make sure we're being able to communicate that story in a way that makes perfect sense. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the agenda today. So a quick look at what we're going to cover. So first, before we actually talk about sort of the remote testing specific issues, I think it's really helpful to have a conversation around why we are talking about delivering perfect mobile applications and not just delivering perfect applications, right? Talking about sort of the market context around the mobile specific customer experience and why it sort of deserves this separate conversation. Then we're going to look at this big mobile challenge, right? Being device fragmentation, and you guessed it, this is what's going to lead some of the issues with the remote access to devices and testing. And then we're going to look at sort of, if we have this challenge, well, what are those solutions, right? And I think that, as was mentioned earlier, we're going to talk a lot about cloud-based platforms, cloud-based real device access, but we're also going to talk a little bit about the do-it-yourself lab approach, right? And look at sort of the pros and cons of each, and then the different kinds of cloud-based platforms as an alternative solutions to the do-it-yourself lab. And then at the end of this, we're going to wrap it up with a quick demo. So I'm joined here by Tyler Mullen, our solutions engineer, and he's going to walk us through what it looks like to access and test against real devices in the Coviton cloud. And we'll make sure we leave 10-15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So please do make sure if you have any questions throughout the length of this presentation to be using that question feature. That way, when we get to the end of this, we'll be able to address those questions in the order that they are received. So with that, let's dive into sort of this market context, right? So that's sort of think about why the mobile specific customer experience matters. And the major fact of the matter is that it matters because people are using it, right? When you look at this, the website traffic share from 2011, 2021, right? Some really recent statistics out of StatCounter. You go back and look at 2011, not that long ago, right? 10 years. Only 6.09% of overall website traffic was tracked through a mobile device, right? The rest of it through tablets, through desktop web, right? The majority of that is just your regular desktop interface. You move up to 2017, now you're right there above that 50% mark, right? It goes slightly down in 2017, 2018, but then you see here today in 2020 and 2021, mobile continues sort of to capture dominance, right? And I think that as you look through some of these next slides, we're going to see that this is sort of a trend that's here to stay. Right? There's nothing unique about this. The mobile phone has just become such a powerful channel, both for customers to use and therefore for you all to be able to interact with your customers. So when we look at sort of revenue implications, let's get down sort of the nuts and bolts. Where's the money in all of this, right? Let's just look at e-commerce as an example and sort of why these trends really matter. You look back in 2016, in trillions, right? The mobile portion, there was about 0.97, I think, $0.97 trillion of e-commerce generated via mobile. And then this year we have a projected 3.56 trillion, right? And also, what's interesting to note is that this is a projected 73% of all all revenue generated by e-commerce, 73%, right, is expected to be driven via a mobile device. So clearly, right, people are using it. They're not just using it, they're buying things on it, right? So conversion becomes a really big deal here. But the thing about that, when I mentioned conversion, it's strange. We'll say, well, 73% of all e-commerce is driven via a mobile device. So given that stat, it really is interesting, right? That when you look at this last 2020 holiday season, this is information out of Adobe. They sort of, I think they track, 100 of the top retailers and e-commerce vendors, and looking at, the difference between revenue generated, conversion rates, what money was spent on what during the 2020 holiday season. When you look at just here at Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and you only have room for these two, but it's the same thing for other holidays, what you see is this interesting trend that, when it comes to conversion rates, you're still seeing mobile conversion rates right around, 2 times lower than web, oftentimes a little bit more than 2 times lower than web, right? Which is, and when I say web, I mean desktop web, right? So this could be still mobile browser, the smartphone still includes not just native apps or hybrid apps, but also mobile browser, right? You're accessing that web interface on your mobile phone. So really strange, right? That you have this, mobile's clearly being used a ton, but still lower conversion rates. And what does that say to me? It says to me there's a whole lot of potential, right, to capture even more revenue when it comes to improving that mobile customer experience, right? Give them a better experience, and revenue should follow. And there's some interesting stats out there that do back this up, right? So when I asked this question, when I saw this stats, like, well, this is really odd. Why is this conversion rate so much lower? And I went out to look at some of this information around the mobile experience, and what I found was that it's shockingly high. It's just shocking how high things like mobile shopping cart abandonment is, right? So the abandonment rate there is an astonishing 85% when it comes to a mobile device. I didn't include the number for desktop web here, but I think it's somewhere, I think it's around 50, 60. Like it's a lot lower than mobile. And when you look at, sort of why this happens, right? I think this is some information out of Google actually a while ago. 70% of that smartphone app or site abandonment is actually due to pages not functioning and loading correctly, right? With 40% of your mobile shoppers, they're not willing to wait any more than 3 seconds, right, before abandoning the retailer travel site, right, due to a bad experience. So beyond just the shopping cart being abandoned, like they will actually abandon the entire site itself, right, if that customer experience isn't sort of up to par, doesn't meet their expectations, right? And the one stat that's not on this slide that is also interesting is I think right now, 1 in 4 mobile applications, right, they're abandoned after their first use. And all of this sort of makes sense given what we're looking at on the screen in these last few slides. So we've got some market context, right? But we're here to talk about some of the challenges, right? So we know that mobile experience matters, people are using it, it's impacting revenue. But what are sort of the challenges that make this mobile, that make mobile conversion rates so much lower, the specific challenges? And I really do think it starts with a conversation around device access and device fragmentation. So let's dive into device fragmentation first, right? I went and I did a bunch of research on what this term really means, both within the mobile testing space, but also across industries. So just look at 2 of them. The first here, what exactly is mobile device fragmentation? I think it's from solutionsreview.com. We can see here, we can sort of highlight the important bit here. It generally refers to, when mobile users are running different versions of an operating system. For example, you could have multiple workers or users in your enterprise using an Android-powered device, but some might not have updated their device down to the latest version of Android, right? So this is focused on operating system difference, right? You can have, like all the Android phones could even be the same Android device, but the operating system itself is different. I think as mobile testers, we're all very aware that operating system difference can cause a lot of fragmentation when it comes to testing, cause a lot of problems for your application, your mobile website. Let's look at another definition, right? So this is a more dev and test centric definition. And I love how they put this here, right? Fragmentation is the inability to write once and run anywhere. So more formally, right, inability to develop an application against a reference operating context and achieve the intended behavior in all operating contexts suitable for that application, right? So what does that context look like? Well, it's not just operating systems from the first example, right? When you go look at really the mobile testing centric definitions, you're also looking at things like the device type, right? The screen size, screen resolution, and operating system. So all of these different variables go into device fragmentation. But why does this matter, right? So if I think, let's start from sort of the perspective of the business, why do they care? Well, look, I mean, if you only develop your application, right, to work on the latest version of iPhone or the latest version of, you know, maybe the latest Samsung running the latest Android OS, it's likely if you're only focusing on those that it's not going to work on all of the older devices, right? Because things just drastically change. I mean, I know any iOS developers and testers out there, you know the differences between one iOS version and the other. I mean, it can literally be night and day. I've seen applications work perfectly on an older iOS version, but on the new one, things just break. You know, I mean, especially when it comes to new security measures and things that are being implemented in these new operating systems. So, you know, we're worried about that poor customer experience. Right? Can things break across a vast majority or even a minority, right, of the market that might be using specific devices and operating system combinations? So you refer to these as OS and device-specific errors and bugs, compatibility issues, right? Making sure that your application is compatible across all these different devices and operating systems. And also, it's a high cost repair for it, right? So depending on the approach you're taking, if you're a business that really has device fragmentation on the front of their mind, it can be really expensive, right, to keep procuring and managing different devices and different operating systems and all this kind of stuff to make sure that your development and testing teams have what they need to check for that compatibility across the board. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, right, when we get into this cloud-based deployment versus do-it-yourself lab. But, when I look at the business perspective, this is typically what we hear. Now, why does the developer care? Well, it makes building for mobile an absolute pain, right? You have to make sure, you essentially have to sort of develop and redevelop, right? Make sure this app works as planned for different devices, operating systems, screen sizes, resolution combinations, etc. And the products, right? Because it's not just the tester that has to care about bugs, right? The buck doesn't just stop in QA, it also stops in development. It's sort of in both places. When you're building an application or even you're building a website that you want to work for mobile devices, if it has bugs, that's not a great feeling, right? And you might build it perfectly for the most popular devices, but you still have these edge case devices that oftentimes in other parts of the world are more popular, right? The device popularity shifts drastically when it comes to what region you're creating a product for. But when it comes to the tester, why does the tester care, right? So if the developer cares because it makes building for mobile a pain, the tester cares because it makes testing for mobile a pain, right? So what this looks like, especially if I'm a manual tester, right, I'm going to have to test and retest the same application potentially across different devices, right? When it comes to things like smoke testing, or comes to things like regression testing, you definitely want to make sure that you can test these. Make sure that, one, the new things work for all the devices, but of course, as we know, it's not typically the new things that don't work, it's the old things that break, right? And you want to make sure that those old things are still intact. By old things, I mean old features, existing features are still intact across these different device types, operating system combinations, right? Beyond manual testing, right? Because we know manual testing just in general, device fragmentation or not, can take a long time. But automation just becomes so difficult to maintain. Not even just with new releases, because yes, you have to reconfigure your automation to work across all these different devices when the UI changes, etc. But even just, when you're creating automation for existing features, it's just difficult, right? Because those technical identifiers, unlike the world of desktop web, the technical identifiers across even just Android devices, there's no standard, right? They can be completely different. If I'm developing an application for a Samsung device, let's take an XPath selector, for example. That XPath selector that might be associated with the same element on the screen can be completely different on a Samsung as it is on an LG, right? And what does that do to a framework like Appium? Well, Appium has no idea where to go. So either your test is going to break, it's going to fail, it's going to pass, maybe it's a false positive, or it's just going to run incorrectly, right? But really, when we get to the heart of what I want to talk about today, no doubt, this automation is a big deal. We talk a lot about this, but I really want to talk about this question, right? How am I supposed to access all of these devices? And this is where we're going to focus on the rest of this presentation, right? The business, absolutely important, right? Especially important for context. But I want to talk about why the developer cares, what the challenges are, why the tester cares, what the challenges are, with a specific focus on this access to devices question. So let's talk about this, right? Clearly, device fragmentation a problem. How are teams coping? Because there are definitely teams that are doing a really good job. And I like to start with sort of a timeline-based approach, right? Because it hasn't been the same, right? Mobile's been a big deal for quite some time now, right? Really over the last 10 years, it's begun to explode. You remember that graph that I showed early on with website traffic share? And the way that we've tested things for mobile applications has also changed. We've accessed devices has changed. So let's look at the evolution, right? And when I look at sort of era one, it's this do-it-yourself approach, right? And there's still a lot of teams who are still here, right, doing a lot of do-it-yourself labs, or sort of partially they have this plus some more developments that they've added, which we'll cover in a minute. But essentially, what this means for the teams is that in addition to the normal dev and test responsibilities, your teams are also now going to have to focus on procuring those devices, right, that you need to test against, but also maintaining those devices, right? And for anyone who knows, keeping devices hooked up into your system on running all the time, batteries bloat, devices go bad, right? You're constantly having to replace things. And look, the reality is, if you're a developer, you want to build stuff. If you're a tester, you want to test stuff. You don't want to have to mess with, you don't have to mess with procuring and maintaining devices over time, especially when the devices that are really relevant, they change like every 6 months or 9 months, right? I mean, you're constantly having to build out your lab, right? So that's, but look, it's nice, and I think we can all agree there are benefits, right, to having things on premises. You have the devices in hand, you can actually test on them like actually in your hand. So there are benefits here, but clear limitations. But this is really sort of the first step that teams started to take when testing for mobile. The next is sort of this combination of emulators and simulators and do-it-yourself labs. So in order to ease the burden, especially earlier on in the development cycle, teams started implementing a lot of testing on emulators and simulators for their unit tests, but a lot of teams are still doing it for their smoke tests and regression tests out there. I have opinions on this. I have no problem with emulators and simulators. I think there's a time and a place for these. But as we know, emulators and simulators, they cannot replicate a real device, right? The tests can be a little flaky when they're running on those. But so you sort of combine, you have the do-it-yourself infrastructure for a lot of us, probably your smoke testing if you want to run tests on real devices. Emulators and simulators are sort of a supplement, oftentimes if you don't have a device in-house, right, in that lab. And this brings us to sort of era 3 and where we really are now, and where I see the industry going for the considerable future. This flexible real device cloud access, right? So what does this look like? We have vendors now that are offering cloud-based access to real devices so that teams can shift procurement and management responsibilities to a specialist, right, to that vendor, while easily being able to access real devices in the cloud no matter where they are, right? So really this is sort of this evolution of real device access. And let's look at, sort of what are the costs, what are the values associated with each of them, right? So I mentioned before, do it yourself, high cost in both time and money. I didn't mention the benefit here, for sure, having devices in-house. There are certain things like shaking it that you can do. It's a lot easier when it's in-house, but so definitely some benefits, but overall, just costs a lot of money to maintain over time. It's just not that scalable. Here, right, you're still having sort of a high cost because you're still maintaining a do-it-yourself lab. But you're also getting poor coverage and quality, right, when you're testing on emulators and simulators, at least if you're using those emulators and simulators for things like sanity, smoke, and regression testing. Once again, I think it's totally fine for things like unit testing. I think that that's where they fit in. But if you're really trying to test your application or mobile website right before you release it to a customer, you're going to want to make sure that's tested on a real device. So this is where the real device cloud comes in. Right? I mean, you lower the cost associated with maintaining and procuring devices. You get that improved quality because you're testing on real devices, but also the access is just way wider, right? If you have devices hosted in the cloud, it doesn't matter where you are, right? This is where the benefit really comes into play, right? For remote teams, me, I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia. Let's say I access devices all the time through the Cobaton solution. I can access devices that are hosted. We have a database and we have a database over in Europe with devices. I can access those devices. My colleague in New Hampshire can access those devices. Colleagues in India can access those devices. Colleagues from all around the world can access those devices in the cloud, right? It doesn't matter where they are, which is sort of the perfect scheme for remote teams. And it's a big reason why we've seen a lot of remote teams sort of make this shift from eras 1 and 2 over to the era 3 here, right, with those real device clouds. But we also, I do want to talk a lot about where remote work is hindering teams. I think it's probably pretty apparent, right? Well, with do-it-yourself options, I mean, these devices are in the office, right? Or they're either in like the office that we all used to go to, right, before the lockdowns began, or they're in your home office, right? And what happens when a device is in your home office? Well, your colleagues can't they can't access it to test on, right? It's solely yours to test, which I think we all know is just not a super scalable option. I mean, I've heard tons of horror stories about teams, because they need to be able to share devices between developers and testers, and testers and testers, or developers and developers. They're actually shipping devices to each other, and like the shipping costs just pile up. Things get lost, things get delayed. Like, it's just an absolute mess, right? Or you have certain people that are having to go into the office to get a test on devices. And I think that's something that we're all aware of. It's just not ideal for most teams right now, right? But there's also a conversation, right, to be had about some of these different cloud options and where remote work might impact some of those, right? Because the reality is, when we mention era 3 being all about real device clouds, it's not all one and the same. There are a lot of different options when it comes to real device cloud access. So let's talk about a few of those, right? Starting with sort of the, where this sort of began, the public cloud, right? So a vendor like BrowserStack is, totally focused on public cloud. And granted, they have tons of devices in the public cloud. So essentially, these are devices that are hosted by a vendor, right? It's a shared pool of devices that everybody can access. So it's totally first come, first serve, right? Typically secured very well, cleanup policies in place. Really, it's not an issue of security. It's more so an issue of access, right? Shared access versus dedicated access. So when I mentioned dedicated access, this is when we talk about dedicated private clouds, right? So this is also hosted by a vendor. So for example, Cobaton, we have a database locally to us here in Atlanta that has a bunch of devices that are specifically dedicated to specific teams using Cobaton, right? So still hosted by Cobaton, accessible to your team via the cloud, but only accessible to your team, totally dedicated access. And what's the major benefit of that? Well, there are a lot of teams actually that have to operate under regulations. They can't share devices in a cloud. No matter the security, it's just how the industry is. But also for things like automation, right? If you want to run your nightly test automation, your nightly builds, which a lot of teams are trying to do, making this move to continuous testing, you want to make sure those devices are available. Once again, I've heard more horror stories about people configuring pipelines with Jenkins, right? And they have their automation set to run, but the device isn't available. That one, either the automation breaks or it can't run at all, depending on how things are configured. Even if just one device, right, within your suite of, let's say you have 7 or 8 devices you want to run these automated tests against, one device can sort of foil that plan, right? So this is, a real big benefit of the private dedicated access, because those devices are only going to be able to be used by you. You cannot ever count on that when it comes to a public cloud, right? This next option is what I call, BYOD, bring your own device cloud access. So this is interesting, and Cobaton sort of pioneered the space here. Essentially, we call this our local cloud, right? Essentially, what this looks like is, this is really helpful for those teams that may have already invested in a do-it-yourself lab, but those devices aren't accessible anymore. So what you can do with Cobaton is you take that locally hosted device. So say, for example, I have my iPhone right here, right? I live, I think, about an hour and a half away from Tyler, the solution engineer on the presentation today. I can just take this iPhone. I have my Mac computer here. I can hook it up to my Mac. I've downloaded the Cobaton Mac OS X software, and that device plugged in my computer is now available in a private access cloud to the rest of my colleagues, only within the Cobaton organization, right? So Tyler, an hour and a half away from me, or another one of my colleagues up in New Hampshire, once again, colleague in Europe, they can all access the device, even though it's hosted right here in my home office in Atlanta, right? So this is awesome. You can essentially recapture that ROI, right? Because this is the issue with things like, there are certain vendors that don't allow this. Most don't allow this. And they said, look, you either got to go public or private. Problem is, look, there, as you mentioned, that era 1, right? A bunch of big time enterprise customers, big time enterprise companies, they already invested in these do-it-yourself labs. They already have devices on hand, right? And you're gonna say, well, you can't use them. Well, they've lost all that ROI on that initial investment. And with things like local cloud, that's a thing of the past. You just hook it into your computer and you're good to go. Anyone can access it from anywhere. And then what I have here is a flexible hybrid cloud as the 4th option. So this isn't a specific, different kind of cloud. It's essentially just allowing for a flexible combination. You can sort of mix and match between the 3 options seen here on the screen. Surprisingly, a lot of vendors don't allow this. Say, look, it's either public or it's private. Sometimes they'll bend the rules if you go and buy a ton of device slots. But I believe in flexibility, and I think the fact is, especially when you're looking across the enterprise where you have tons of teams with different needs. I mean, I know tons of customers who certain teams operate in more regulated spaces. They need something like a private cloud, right? And then they have other teams that just need access to specific devices for edge case testing, or sometimes they use it for support and replicating user issues, and they can use the public cloud, right? So being able to build what I call a hybrid cloud option, I think is really, really interesting, right? And it just gives you that extra flexibility that matches that complexity across most enterprise teams. So there's still this nagging question. We sort of talked about this with the local cloud, all the teams that invested in locally available devices. And this is where I think that local cloud is so important. So I wanted to have another slide about it to make sure we're on the same page there. That ROI, we do not want to, we don't want this to be lost, right, for teams. We want to make this as seamless as possible. We don't want to have teams having to ship different devices, locally hosted devices across teammates and sometimes across state boundaries, countries. I mean, I've heard of international sharing of devices. It's crazy the lengths that some teams have to go through, right, just to be able to share access to these locally hosted devices. So this is why I want to sort of open up a conversation before we get into the demo and get into questions. I want to talk a little bit about how Cobaton can help, right? So when you look at who we are, there are probably some of us on the call who aren't as familiar with Cobaton yet. Our goal is to empower quality access companies to build better applications, test those applications a lot smarter, and ultimately we want to scale together with you, right? So this ability to access we have customers accessing up to thousands of devices at a time in private clouds. We have customers who are accessing hundreds of different devices in the public cloud, or hooking up hundreds of devices in a local cloud. And the number doesn't matter, right? We want to be at a scale. So as you all grow, that application gets more and more popular. I mean, to build more and more things, test more and more things, Cobaton's going to scale right alongside you, right? And our major points of focus, we want to help you eliminate that app abandonment, right? I mentioned earlier, 1 in 4 mobile applications are abandoned after first use. We want to help you accelerate automation, ultimately convert more opportunity on your mobile channels, right? So remember that stat earlier, that conversion rates on mobile, at least 2 times lower than web. We want to get that. We want to get that better than web. That's our goal. We want to make the mobile channel like the best channel to drive revenue for your business. We have some really interesting customers who are using Cobaton for some really interesting things. When it comes to the device access, I like to focus here on Rakuten. So they have this need to be able to access a ton of devices now that their teams are distributed, so they can actually tame and scale that test automation across these different real devices. And that's what they're using Cobaton for, right? Being able to access those devices in the cloud. So I mentioned this, the real devices, the way we talk about is the real devices, however you want them. We talk about device freedom, right? What does this allow you to do? We'll talk about this in a minute. Being able to drive functional, visual, and performance testing across your mobile devices and IoT devices. No matter where you are, no matter where those devices are, access them in the cloud through a public, private, local, or hybrid option. We also have an on-premises option for teams who are interested in that. I know there are some teams that need those extra sensitive on-premises deployments. So what does this allow you to do beyond just the device access? Allows you to scale your automation, right? Whether you're using the really popular frameworks like Appium, Espresso, XUI Test, or we have a Cobaton proprietary scriptless solution that's really interesting and allows you to sort of make this jump to automation very quickly. We're going to make all that automation more productive. So once again, run on real devices, capture more, quality becomes a lot higher when you're testing on real devices as opposed to things like emulators or simulators. And I mentioned this, the functional, visual, and performance testing. Once again, this is something you can run across all the different devices accessible in the cloud. One of the cool things about this AI-driven scriptless solution, and we actually also just released an AI-enhanced script-based solution, so it's actually injecting our AI into your Appium script. It's cool because we have all of these baked-in assertions with our AI engine, right? That AI engine's name is Nova, so you'll hear me talk about Nova a lot. Tyler will also probably talk about Nova some in the demo. But essentially what you can do is you can create that test. You can author it either by capturing a manual process or taking an already existing Appium script, inject the assertions. So let's take visual testing, for example. We have a library of visual assertions that are sort of baked into that engine. And every single time you run one of these Nova-driven tests across your real devices, you're getting information around crashes, around function, around visual appearance, around front-end performance, right? So it's sort of this, I like to refer to it as the sort of one test to rule them all mentality and approach with Cobaton. And also, sort of beyond, I mentioned earlier, we want to focus on what we can do for developers, right? Because developers want to be able to test as well as they want to be able to build, make sure that what they're building works by actually seeing it and messing with it, right, on a real device. So if your developers don't have access to a device, we do some really cool solutions around debugging, where you can essentially establish a secure tunnel, right, between a Kobaton Cloud real device and your IDE, right? We have IDE plugins, so Visual Studio, Android Studio, Eclipse. We've got one for IntelliJ as well, that allow you to sort of directly connect into those devices. The device, as you see in the illustration here, will literally just pop up right there in your IDE, so you can easily debug and test on those real devices before you actually, ship them over to test, for QA to run, your regression, your smoke, your sanity testing. One of the really cool things here is that, and this is a unique thing with Kobaton, you can actually do this with iOS devices too, right? So you can access your iOS devices and Xcode for iOS debugging, whereas that's typically very difficult, because I think we all know iOS can be a bit difficult and a little less cooperative, as opposed to Android devices. So a quick overview, right, of the platform here. Kobaton, right, what we're talking about today, that real device infrastructure, everything we do is built on top of that, right? So that public, private, we like to call that cloudified local deployment, the ability to mix and match those different options with a hybrid deployment, and of course for teams who need it, while it's not the focus of today, and under lock and key, extra sensitive on-premises deployment for teams who really, really do need that kind of device access. And on top of that, right, we talk about ourselves as much more than a device provider, even when we are talking all about devices, like in today's conversation. But beyond that, our goal is to help you prevent bugs from even making it into test. Once they get there, to perfect that application with this industry-leading set of flexible solutions around functional testing, visual testing, and performance testing. We talk about that as our intelligent quality suite. I'd like to talk about, what good is it finding issues if you can't fix them and resolve for them? So once you actually run your test and the issues are found, we have really cool AI-based remediation capabilities, where we'll actually flag the specific issues, invoke, caught by invoked assertions, allow you to remediate for those problems. And we also, and Tyler's going to show this in just a minute here, we also have some really interesting session exploration capabilities, right? And at the end of the day, what's the goal? Let's ship high quality mobile applications and products faster, right? So this release piece here, we're going to help you release efficiently and release quickly. And I like to talk here about purposeful, integrations into your CI/CD tooling. I like to joke that, your integration with Jenkins, like everyone integrates Jenkins, right? If there's a vendor that doesn't integrate with Jenkins or someone like Jira, I haven't seen one, right? They're pretty far behind if that's the case. So we don't claim that our Jenkins integration existing is unique, but what is unique is that it's purposeful, right? Your integration with Jenkins is only ever as useful as your automation is stable and reliable, right? If you have those nightly builds scheduled, if your automation breaks every single time, it's not flexible to be able to run across these different devices and actually find all the issues that you're looking to find, that integration is not doing you any good, right? So because we have those robust automation offerings layered on top of the real devices for that automation to run against, also for manual tests if you need to, but in the case of automation and continuous testing, releasing faster, those integrations that we provide with tools like Jenkins, Travis CI, Circle CI, Bitrise, all of that stuff is purposeful when you're using with Kobaton, actually helps you release quicker. So with that, I recognize I've done a lot of talking. I think it's been a cool and fun conversation. I really can't wait to see what some of y'all's questions are. But enough talking. I want you all to be able to see this stuff in action, right? So Tyler, if you give me a minute, I am going to give the presentation reins over to you, and you should be able to share your screen and show everybody what Kobaton's all about.
Perfect. Y'all hear me all right? Can see my screen?
Yep, yep, we can hear you and see the screen. Thanks, Tyler.
A little way. Thanks, Alex. Let me move this down here. All right, everybody. My name is Tyler Mullen. I'm one of the sales engineers here at Kobaton. I'm gonna be walking you through the Kobaton UI and giving you a little demo of our whole platform. Right now, we're looking at the UI right here. Some of the differences off the bat. Your username would be up here. You can add your own picture. Where it says Kobaton Inc., this would be the name of your company or your org. And once you have an org, you can have as many teams on this platform as you like. So we encourage you to have as many users, create as many groups on this platform as you like. And the nice thing about this, then you can actually tailor these groups as you like. So if you wanted to have your your Android testers right here only have access to Android devices, you can do that on our platform. If you wanted your automation team only to have access to, a couple local devices and then a couple public devices, you can tailor that in our group, in our org management. But right now we're looking at the public cloud. We have 3 deployment options. We're looking at the public cloud right now. These are first come, first serve. These are real devices. They're not emulators or simulators. You can see we have multiple versions of the same devices, different operating systems as well. Anything that is being utilized is going to be in this mustard orange, where I can't come in here and click on the launch button. If I come down here to the next one, the Galaxy A30, I can come in here, launch this device, go right into a manual session and start doing my testing. You can see right now we have 70 iOS, 66 Android. We usually try to be around the 300 range for our public cloud. Right now I'm looking at the card view. If I switched over to list view, it's going to give you a little bit more information on the device. For our public cloud, these are by the minute, so it's 10 cents per minute. The private and local is a different payment, and we'll get into that here in a second. But on this view right here, the list view, you can see I got a little bit more information on the device. You can see the OS version, you can see the UDID, the manufacturer, and then you actually have the ability to edit these columns. So I can come here and say I don't really care about the manufacturer, I want to see the resolution, or I want to see the browser. We give you a default of 9 that you can work with. For our local and private, this is a new feature that came out a couple of releases ago. You can actually see the using and over here local. You can see that I launched the device a couple minutes ago, 11 minutes ago. Tyler Mullen's using it. You only have access to, on your local or private, a certain amount of devices. If somebody's been using it all day, you can actually go in there and say, hey, Tyler, you've been on here for 2 hours. Let me get on there and do some testing. So that is our public cloud right here. Again, first come, first serve, and it's 10 cents per minute. For our private and local, Alex talked about this a little bit. These devices right here, 2 of them are actually at my house and 1 of them is at my colleagues in New Hampshire. These are all accessible for everybody who's underneath this Kobaton org, or you could say, hey, I don't want certain people to have access to that. You can go into our org management over here on the left and tailor that as you like. Again, for our private and local, for the local, you're going to go up here. You're going to download our DLM software to a Mac product. You can do that straight to a MacBook Pro or a Mac Mini. If you have a Mac Mini, I suggest you have a hub so you could hook up more devices than that you like. I have a hub with about 10 slots on it. You could hook up 10 devices, iOS or Android, then you can do concurrent testing on those. The nice thing about the local, like Alex was saying, I could have one here. My colleague in New Hampshire could have one. We could have one in Europe, and they'll all show up underneath this same org. For our private devices, those are devices that we procure for you. You say what devices you want, what OS versions you want on those devices, and then we procure those for you, house those in our data center. If you need to upgrade them, you need something done to them, you reach out to us and we'll maintain those devices for you. I'm going to go ahead and come over here to the left. I'm going to go through all these tabs pretty quickly, but we're going to, as we go through the demo, I'll come back to these. Right here is our session tab. So after every manual, automation, or scriptless session, you're going to get a video of that session. You're going to get the ability to name that session, give a description of that session. You're going to get logs. You're going to have a step-by-step iframe movie where it's going to show you every gesture, every click, everything you performed on that device. And I'll get into that a little bit more. And again, it's going to have the logs as well. That is you install your APKs and IPAs. These will only, I have a bunch on here because this is our demo environment. These will only be the apps that you install. Nobody else will see your apps. You won't see anybody else's apps. If you look right here, this app demo that has 4 different applications. If I come down here, each application, once you install it, it gets a unique number. So if I come to this one, it's going to be a different number. If you're doing regression testing, if you need to go test on a different version of the app very simply and go from version to version, you just come in here and change this automation snippet. We already got it for you right here. You change this Kobaton store with this unique number, and you can go from version to version of that application very simply. Underneath that is our org management. I touched base on this a little about an org up here. You create your org, and then you can create as many groups and as many users as you like. So this is why we encourage you to have your developers on here, have all your QA members, have all your manual and automation testers on here, even if it's just for sharing information, and I'll get to where you can share information very simply on our platform, but you can have as many users, as many groups as you like. It's very simple. You come in here, create a member. I'm not going to go through all this. You add it. You add your email address. You can give it a role. We have admin or user, and then you can designate a group you want to put that user in. The nice thing about that is that user can be in multiple groups. And then once you have those groups created, you can assign users and devices. So it's pretty simple to assign devices. You come in here, give this a second to populate. These are all the devices that are available on our platform. So you can come to all, you can come to public. So these are going to be the public devices. The in-house devices are going to be like the devices that are housed at my house in my local deployment or my colleague's deployment in New Hampshire. I can come here, click on that, and just add it to my list over here. So you can see that this will change to 227 devices, and that's how you can create members and groups here. And this is also where you create your device bundles for our scriptless automation. These ones in purple, these are the top 5, top 10, and top 20 global devices that are being used. These ones down here in black are our custom ones where you can come in and create your own. You can do a smoke test. You can see I have a smoke test down here. Looks like there's my Tyler smoke test. There's 7 Android devices I test on all the time. So after my scriptless automation, it will prompt you to build your device bundles. You could already have your bundle built. Come in here and you're good to go with your testing. Underneath that's our feedback. This is a in beta tab. It's just for what's coming in down the pipeline, what's already been released, and it gives you the ability to actually vote on feature requests or create your own feature requests, and other customers can come in and say, hey, yeah, I need, biometrics, I need something that's on our roadmap, and they can vote on it, and we'll move it up into the roadmap to make it come out sooner. Up here at the top of the page, this is our DLM software for the local deployment. Next to that is our support. So we use Zendesk ticketing system, put in a ticket, give a description, and we'll get back to you in 24 hours. Here's our user guide, and then here's our APIs. So pretty much everything I'm showing you here in our UI, you can use our REST API commands to do it. So if you needed to check on a device's status, you needed to get a group or assign a user to a group, you can do all that through this. And then we're very flexible when it comes to coding languages. And so if you can see this one's in Java. If I wanted to use JavaScript or Ruby, it changes for you and gives you that sample request right here and that snippet right here. So that's our REST APIs. So everything that I'm doing in this UI, you can use our REST APIs. So let's go ahead and get into the meat of the product. I'm going to go ahead and launch the device. Let's go down here and we'll do this Galaxy Note 10 or Note 9, excuse me. I'll go ahead and click on launch. The device is going to start launching. You can see that this is the public cloud. You'll see the clock start launching here in a second once it gets cleaned up and started. Once it starts, I'll walk you through everything on the left, and then I'll get you going on this manual test. All right, the device is connected. You can see that the live logs are running over here on the right. If I wanted to, expand these logs, I can click right here, expand these logs all the way out. They're a little bit easier to read. If I wanted to filter them, look at debugging, look at warnings, errors, I have the ability to do that. I can pause it. I can download these logs right now if I needed to, or I could get these logs later in the session review. And I'll show you that here in a second. So let me get this back over there. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and name this session so I could say, webinar demo, and I'll do a scriptless demo. So it'll be easier in our session review just to find this when we get there. So that has been named. You can see that this is a Galaxy Note 9. This is running Android 10. Each session has its own unique number on it as well. Over here on the left, I'm going to go ahead and install an application, and then I'll go through everything on the left of there. So I'm going to search for an River Island. This is an APK that I installed earlier. I'm going to install that. Right now I'm on the touch. You have the ability to pinch to zoom as well. So you can come in here, simulate pinching to zoom. You can spoof location. So if you need this device to be in a certain location on the globe, you can spoof this device to sync that. So if you need to be in Belgium and you need to test ads that are popping up in Belgium, you can come in here, put the latitude and longitude to think that it's actually in Belgium. Then we have our set time zone as well. Rotate screen from landscape to portrait. Here's our ADB. Let me get this out of here, do it later. Get this app launching. Skip. All right, so now that app is all the way good. You can rotate landscape and portrait right here. Here's our ADB shell command. So again, Alex was talking about this earlier. We want your developers on this tool. So if your developer is coming in here and doing a manual test, he has the ability to do ADB shell commands right from this test. So he could do a simple, ADB command just to see what, application I'm running right here. So it's running River Island. Again, we want all your users on this platform. Unlimited users, have all your devs on here, even if it's just for them to come in here, do shell commands, or just to share information. Again, we also have those ADB debugging tools for IntelliJ and Android Studios as well. Underneath the shell command is just our normal functioning buttons, so power, the home button, recent apps, and the back button. So I'm going to go through this application. We're just going to do a simple test. And as I'm going through this, our scriptless automation is working in the background. So every test, every touch, every gesture, every swipe that I'm performing, it's recording this, and then I can take that exact manual test and run it up to against 20 devices in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and click on menswear. I'm going to scroll down here. I'll click on, jeans. And the nice thing about this, as I'm going through this, if I find something that's not rendering correctly, or these jeans were supposed to be white or red or something like that, for example, I have the ability to take screenshots too. So I can take a screenshot here. I can scroll down and say, oh, the pricing on this one is not correct. Let me take another screenshot. And I can come in here, look at our screenshot repository. I can download these individually, pass these to a developer, or pass these to a colleague, or at the end of my session review, all these screenshots will be there for me as well. So I'm gonna go through here. Finish a simple test. I'll click on these jeans. They look good. I will add them to my bag. I'll pick a size as well. And again, every gesture, every swipe that I'm performing right now is recording that. I can view my bag, proceed to checkout. All right, I could enter email address, password if I needed to do that. But I'm gonna go ahead and end my test right here. It's gonna say, are you sure you wanna end the session? Yes, I do. And then you're gonna get a prompt for our scriptless automation. So I'm gonna say, yes, I want to run scriptless automation. This has got our Nova engine built in, so that's our machine learning in the background. The great thing about our machine learning is where I'm gonna show you here in a second is about our assertions. It gives you that ability to teach this machine learning how you wanna be doing your testing in the future. And I'll touch base on that here in a second. So I'm gonna say, yes, I wanna run that exact test with scriptless automation. So here's those device bundles I was talking about earlier, where the 3 defaults are in purple. So I could do top 5, top 10, top 20 globally, or if I already have my custom one built, I can come down here and say, hey, I want to do Tyler's smoke test right here. Let's go ahead and just go to top 10. I say I don't want to do every single one of these. I can come in here and choose as I like. So I'll just do these 3. So I'll do a Galaxy A50. I won't do another Note 9. I'll do a Galaxy G6, and I'll do a Galaxy S9. So right now, the nice thing is I could grab this, I could download this Appium. The Appium script will be ready for me here in a second. So I could run that manual test. The Appium script is created for me. You don't have to be, an automation engineer to be able to use this tool. You could take this script, you can manipulate that script as you want. You could comma stuff out. You could add stuff to your script. It's your script to do what you like with as you please. So I'm gonna go ahead and say, I'm gonna run it on these 3 devices. I'm gonna say run scriptless automation. It's going to take you to this execution page. So I can see I have 3 queued up. Once they start running, you're going to get an email that says, hey, Tyler, your 3 tests have kicked off. And then you're going to get an email when it finishes. So an email when it starts, email when it finishes, and that email is going to have results as well. And then you're going to have results down here. So they will tell me what has passed, what has failed. If I have any actions over here, the actions will be remediations that I need to look at. And then each of these will be able to click on and go into a session review. I did this before this call, so I'm going to show you exactly what one looks like before. So I did six devices on this one. You can see I had 3 passed right here. I had 3 failed. I had no blockers. But when I scroll down here, so up at the top, this Appium script is ready. So I could download this and go and manipulate that script as I want, or do whatever I want with it. Here are all the 6 individual sessions. So each of those sessions has its own session review, and that's got the video, it's got the logs, and I'll show you that here in a second. But what I want to show you is these remediations on the right. So each of these, so you can see this one passed, but it's got 6 things that it wants to bring to your attention. So it's got 6 actions it wants you to teach that machine learning how you want it to be doing in the future. So I'm gonna come down to this one that I haven't done yet. It's got 7, so I'm gonna click on this one. It's another one that is passed. You can see here are our remediations. I got some text, I got some visual, and some performance as well. So I'm gonna come down here to these color assertions. So it looks like I have 3 color assertions I need to come and look at. I'm gonna click on this unresolved button right here. It's gonna take me to this page. So the manual test that I performed was on a Galaxy S10 Plus running Android 10. That's here on the left. The automation test was run on a Galaxy A50 on Android 9, so totally different devices, totally different operating systems, and it's going to give you a visual of exactly what's going on. So on this one, it's clicking on this square around the search button for men's shoes, and it's showing you that it was this, you know, dark black on the manual test. But on the automation test, it shows you it's a little bit different. So this really might not be a big deal to you. So this gives you the ability to teach that machine learning that let's be relaxed on this. Anytime it comes up where it's in this range of color, it's really not a big deal. Just pass it and move on. If it would have been red, like this box would have been red, or it would have been, you know, orange or something that you didn't want it to be, this is where you can come here and say, hey, don't be relaxed, be strict. Every time you find this, I want to be, you know, let me know that this is happening, and we can, you know, go and look at it. And then you have the ability to pick it on devices as well. So it could do it on, this is on Galaxy A50 right now. I could do it on a Galaxy Note 4. I could do it on a Galaxy. So anytime it finds it on this, I want to be, you know, told about it. I want to be brought to my attention. But since this is really a big deal, I'm going to say, let's just be relaxed on it, and we can submit it. You know, this wasn't even showing up in your thing. You have the ability to create a JIRA ticket right here. You can create a ticket and say, you know, issue with element color, something simple like that. You're getting the session review number right there. So that's that unique number. That's a hyperlink right to this exact session. So they can come, you can pass this to your developers. They can come in and see exactly what's going on, getting all the information on the device. You're getting some fields that you can fill out right here. And then you actually have your device logs as well. So I'm going to go through that real quick. So this is where you can come in here and do your remediations. Coming back here, I know we only have about 7 minutes left, but I want to show you some more stuff real quick. The data-driven testing, this is huge. I think this is one of the biggest benefits of our scriptless automation. Instead of having to go into your script and say you wanted to add more devices, or you wanted to add another step, or you wanted to, instead of doing one drop down, you wanted to do something different on the drop down, or you had a calendar date you wanted to change, this gives you the ability to create those sets right now. So this is when I first logged into this. The first time I logged in, I was looking for men's shoes. So I have the ability to create data sets. So the next time I log in, I could look at men's shirts. And then the next time I log in, I could look at women's shoes. And then it gives you the ability to actually, you know, designate that device as well. So I want to do a Galaxy A50 the next time I log in, and then I want to look for women's shoes instead. So you can create these data sets right here. We also have the ability to do validations as well. So you can do validations for, you know, if an element exists. So say I wanted to make sure these 4 buttons at the top, women, men, girls, and boys, all are just there, or the search button is there. I can just actually click here and make sure that element exists, or I can validate the element is visible as well too. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'll click on these 4 things. I can come down here, and when I rerun this script, when it goes through this test, it's going to make sure that those are there. And let me go ahead and move forward. Once you do all this, you can rerun your script. This is where a session review looks like. Let me go, this one will be a better one to show. So every session review, manual, automation, or scriptless, you're going to get the same information. You have the ability to see the video of that session. You can download this individually. You can name it, give a description, see that this was the manual session, see who ran it. Alex ran this one, the duration that it completed, start and finished. You're going to get the device logs down there. If you installed any applications down here, they'll all be listed as well. You're going to get all the information all the way down to the UDID of the device. You have the details right here. This is great. So we're giving you the system metrics. So you get CPU, memory, network. You can switch through this. And then we're also giving you the ability to observe the request and the response. So let me go down here and show you all this. You can change all this. Let me get this going, play it. I'm gonna move that back. Where's where I want it to be? I'll do it right here. So I want to be right on these. So I'm getting the request and the response as it's going through this test. So I can click on this request. It's going to show me all that information right there. I'm going to get the response as well. So we're giving you all those details right here. And here's that iframe movie I was talking about. So every click, every gesture that I performed on this device is showing me clip by clip. So I can go from 1 to 1. I can do it like this. I have the ability to see the payload right here. So that's what I'm showing you right now is the response and the payload, the request and the response and the payload. Another nice feature just came out is you can actually analyze the response time. So we give you a baseline of 2 seconds. So all these are different, you know, the JSON or an application installing or an image popping up. They're all different things. So as I come here, each of these red dots, so this was a response time. This was over about 6 seconds. So again, this is the baseline of 2 seconds. Anything that is green is below 2 seconds. Anything that is red is above 2 seconds. And we give you all that information right in here. You have the ability to create a JIRA ticket right here. You can rerun your scriptless automation right here. And the nice thing about this is if you have a different version of the application that just came out, you don't have to rerun that manual test. You can come in here, click on that new version, and then rerun it again. You also have the ability to create a hyperlink right here. Create this hyperlink, so you might find an issue right here at 1 minute and 8 seconds. Pass that through JIRA, pass that through Slack. That's why we encourage you to have as many users on this platform as possible, just so you can share information. Another nice thing you can do up here in the URL, this is that each session has its own unique number. Grab this hyperlink, pass this to your developers, and they can come right in here and have all this information right at hand. Let me move back out here to the main window. One last thing I want to show you is our cleanup policy. So after every session, we run a cleanup policy, and you have the ability to tailor this. On our public cloud, this will all be checked. It's pretty much wiping these devices completely clean without knocking them offline. But on our private and local, you can tailor this as you like. So if you wanted to keep the apps that you installed on the device, one less step. If you wanted to keep a signed in account there, you can do that. Settings, you can do all that right here, and you can just update it. So instead of having to install that application every single time, it can stay right on the device. Or if you wanted to wipe them clean every single time, you can do that here. I know that was a lot of information coming fast, but yeah, I'm gonna pass it back to you, Alex. We got like 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler. No, I appreciate that. Let me get this back in sharing. So I believe I saw that we had some questions, and I know we have a few minutes left. So Christina, I'll hand it over to you to run us through those, and hopefully we can answer a few.
Yeah, definitely. Again, if anyone has any questions, you can submit them now. If we don't get to your questions, because it looks like we're only going to be able to get to 1 or 2, we can always follow up with you guys after the presentation. So,
absolutely.
How is local cloud different than on-premise, Alex? And does Kobiton offer an on-premise solution?
Yeah, so as mentioned a little earlier, I think I probably just glossed over it because we were talking about cloud stuff. We do have an on-premises solution. However, it is different than our local cloud, right? So local cloud, let's start with the similarities, right? So on-premises is going to be locally hosted. Local cloud is also, those devices are going to be locally hosted. The difference is that your on-premises device, there's no access outside of, would probably be your firewall, right? It's where you are and it's only accessible there. Whereas with the local cloud, I could take, once again, a device here that I have, and I could take it out of my on-premises setup if I wanted to, plug it into my MacBook, install that Kobiton software, and then it's available in the cloud for the rest of my team to access, right? So yes, in both options, devices are locally hosted, but one stays local, the other gets put in the cloud. It's the essential difference.
Okay, great. So that's all going to be all the time we have for today. But before we go, I just want to throw it back over to you and Tyler. If you guys have any final thoughts or key takeaways you want to leave our attendees with.
Yeah, for the sake of time, I'll just go ahead and wrap up because I know that I don't want to take too much time out of you all's days. But one of the things that, one, thank you all for attending. This was really a great time, and we always really appreciate it when you all are here and listen to us speak, and we love having these two-way conversations. But one of the things I wanted to make sure and invite you all to do is to join a brand new Discord server that we just launched. It's totally vendor agnostic. It's the mobile dev test ops community that, Kobiton, we've created, but once again, totally vendor agnostic. You do not need to be a customer. There's no vendor shaming allowed. There's also no selling allowed, so we're not going to sell you anything on that on the server. The goal here is to have an inclusive community, right? That anyone can come in, share success stories, ask questions, and engage with people who are, doing all things mobile dev test ops. So I'm actually sending the invite link right now in the chat. I know we'll follow up with this link as well if you have joined, but once again, thank you for joining, and we really do hope to see you on Discord and continue these conversations.
Great. Thank you guys for a great presentation. Again, we will follow up with that Discord link for anyone that wants to join. And that was Kobiton Product Marketing Manager, Alex Drag, and Solutions Engineer, Tyler Mullen. And thank you, Kobiton, for sponsoring today's event, as well as our attendees for joining us today. Until next time, I'm Christina Cardoza.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Christina.
Everybody.